Chapter 1. Whispers of the Silk Road. The wind howled through the narrow pass, carrying with it the scent of damp earth in distant storms. Ferdinand Verbiest tightened his cloak against the biting cold, his breath curling in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The Silk Road stretched before him, a ribbon of dust and legend, whispering secrets older than empires. He had come to Asia not just as a missionary, but as a hunter of knowledge on who sought the hidden patterns in the sky's fury. The year was 1660, and the Qing dynasty ruled with an iron grip. The emperor's decrees were absolute, his displeasure swift and brutal. Yet Verbiest, a Flemish Jesuit with a scientist's curiosity, had defied them all. He had mapped the stars, charted the heavens, and now he sought the storms. The violent tempests that tore through the valleys, the cyclones that swallowed entire caravans, these were not mere acts of nature. They were puzzles waiting to be solved. His fingers traced the edges of a weathered parchment, its surface etched with symbols and calculations. The ink had faded, but the numbers remained clear. Wind speeds, pressure changes, the angle of the sun, each detail was a piece of a greater truth. Verbiest had spent years in the Imperial Observatory, surrounded by astronomical instruments of brass and steel, their gears whispering the language of the cosmos. But the storms were different. They were wild and tamed, and they demanded to be understood. A gust of wind tore at his cloak, and for a moment he thought he heard laughter in the howling. The locals spoke of spirits in the wind, of dragons coiled in the clouds. Verbiest knew better. There were no dragons, only forces of nature, waiting to be deciphered, and if he could unlock their secrets, he might change the course of history. The first storm found him in the desert, where the sand shifted like a living thing, the horizon darkened, and the air grew thick with the promise of violence. Verbiest stood firm, his instruments clutched tightly in his hands. The wind screamed, and the sky split open with lightning. Rain lashed his face, but he did not flinch. He watched, measured, recorded. The storm was a living thing, and he was its chronicler. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Verbiest moved from one end of the Silk Road to the other, chasing the storms as they danced across the land. He slept in abandoned caravanserai, his bedroll damp with dew, his dreams filled with the roar of the tempest. The locals called him mad, a man who courted death. But Verbiest knew the truth was not chasing storms, he was chasing the future. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, he found himself in a small village nestled between two mountains. The people here were wary, their eyes wide with superstition. They spoke of a storm that had once swallowed their ancestors whole, a tempest so fierce it had carved the very earth. Verbiest listened, his mind racing. If the storms were predictable, if their patterns could be mapped, then lives could be saved. He set up his instruments in the village square, the brass gleaming in the firelight. The villagers watched in silence as he adjusted the sextant, his fingers moving with practiced precision. The night was still, the air heavy with anticipation. And then, just as the first stars began to flicker, the wind returned. It was a whisper at first, a soft sigh against the mountains, but it grew, swelling into a roar that shook the earth. Verbiest's instruments trembled, their needles dancing wildly. He scribbled notes, his hand moving fast in the storm itself. The villagers huddled together, their faces pale with fear. But Verbiest did not fear the storm. He feared only the unknown. As the tempest raged, he saw something he had never seen before, a pattern, a rhythm in the chaos. The wind did not move randomly. It followed, a path, a dance as old as time itself. And if he could trace that path, if he could predict where the storm would strike next, then he could save lives. The storm passed, leaving behind a world transformed. The village was unharmed, its people safe. Verbiest stood amidst the wreckage of his instruments, his heart pounding with exhilaration. He had done it. He had seen the storm's secrets, and they had spoken to him. But this was only the beginning. The Silk Road was vast, its storms countless, and Verbiest knew that somewhere out there, in the heart of Asia's wild skies, lay the answers he sought. The next storm would come, and he would be ready, for he was not just a storm chaser. He was a pioneer, a man who would change the way the world saw the sky. And so, as the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, Ferdinand Verbiest packed his belongings and set out once more. The whispers of the Silk Road called to him, and he would follow them to the end. For in the heart of the storm, he had found his purpose, and the world would never be the same.